one of the things we've certainly tried to do is to bring it full circle and relate it to today. And one of the clearest examples of not only how his legacy lives on, but also some of the strife, some of the disdain, and some of the hatred that can be created just by pushing for equality and change. Certainly that narrative has yet to die in our long history. And one of the greatest examples that, of course, has been in sports with Colin Kaepernick, even Serena Williams, LeBron James, a number of Black professional athletes or athletes of color in general who have faced backlash, who have faced hatred, who have even lost endorsements and fans because they made the conscientious decision to stand for something greater than their ability. So to bring this conversation into focus, I'd like to welcome Etan Thomas, who is a poet, an author, an activist, and once upon a time he played a little basketball too. And of course, Pastor Mike McBride.
Come on, y'all. One more time for Etan Thomas. So glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You have been one of the real earliest athletes, former athletes who have attempted to document and do a broad survey of many, many folks in sports who have taken seriously the role of activism. There's a real powerful picture back in 1967. I don't know how many of you may remember this photo with Muhammad Ali and Bill Russell and Smoking Joe Frazier. You all were together in Cleveland talking about their role as athletes to support Muhammad Ali during that time, who was, of course, being blackballed by all kind of folks for his opposition to the war in Vietnam. Colin Kaepernick has really brought that energy back to the forefront, and I'm curious to just have you put some of that in context. Many people may think that Colin Kaepernick is an anomaly, that he's one of the few folks in the sports arena that cares about these sets of issues, but you have a whole book called, and you should go get it. How many readers we got out here? All right? My mentor said, if you ain't reading, you ain't got nothing to say. Somebody say amen, right? So go get this book. It's called We Matter. It is a signature work of Etan. Talk to us about why you wrote this book and what are some of the key lessons and takeaways.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to write this book and put it together. I wanted to interview a lot of the athletes who I grew up admiring, like Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and have them talk about, what it was about them that wanted them to take this stand and to do it no matter what anybody else said. And I wanted to use this book as an example to younger athletes to really inspire them. So I wanted to interview athletes who were current right now, where young people are watching, like Dwayne Wade, you know what I mean, like Carmelo Anthony, like Eric Reed, and talk about their activism. It's interesting when we mentioned Colin Kaepernick. All today, you'll see all of these different NFL teams and all these different people and senators, tweet out things about Dr. King and tweet out things like that, but those are the same people who blackballed Colin Kaepernick for nonviolent protests.
Wow.
And so just making that connection is something that, right now in this society, he's being blackballed, and it's not just about him. It's being blackballed to send a message to all future athlete activists that if you do speak out, this will also happen to you. And what I wanted to do with this book was to really show athletes that you don't have to be afraid. You can look at these athletes and tell them, as they tell their stories, as Dwayne Wade talks about why he supported Trayvon Martin family and spoke out, and they did the iconic picture all in the hoodies after Trayvon Martin was killed. Why he did it, and that's been the real, mainstream America. When they hear an athlete say it, it just resonates differently. And that's why it's so important to really encourage younger athletes to continue using their voice.
Yeah, we and next year we'll just for sure. We were trying to get some of our players from the WNBA to be here today too, because they were really the first group of athletes that actually started champion and put those clothes. Y'all remember that?
Oh.
Man, a lot of the fellas was a little bit behind, but the sisters came out. And so when you talk about what you learned from those individuals like Kareem and Bill Russell, what did you hear and learn from them that drove them to this level of activism? And then what did you hear from the younger athletes that is driving them? Was there any overlap?
There's definitely overlap. And you mentioned WNBA, so I was able to interview Swin Cash and Tamika Catchings.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that I asked them, you know, I was like, you know, because if you remember with the WNBA, they all did it together.
Yeah.
The entire league.
The entire league.
You know what I mean? And one of the things that I asked Swin Cash in the book, I was like, well, how did you get the white players to do it and the foreign players? Because some of them, they're not even from here.
Wow.
You know what I mean? They don't know what's going on. They just come here to play and then they go back overseas. And, you know, her answer was, well, for one thing, you know, women do it differently. So I was like, well, expound on that for me. And she said, well, you know, they saw their sister hurting. And it was right after the back-to-back murders of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. And everybody was all upset by it and everything like that. And they said, you know, if you're hurting, I'm hurting. And then we have that empathy. And then now we're going to stand in this together to be able to tell the world that this is not right. And the way that they did that together, it was just amazing. And I don't think that they got enough press coverage for that. So I really wanted to highlight that in the book, because you have younger female athletes watching and they're being empowered. I mean, I have 2 daughters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My daughters are watching Swing Cast. They're listening to Jemele Hill, who I also had a chance to interview.
Yeah.
You know, and they're being empowered by all of their words. So that's why it's important to really not only highlight athletes to continue using their voice, but then also to encourage younger athletes to continue that tradition.
Right. You know, one of the great messages that I think you just said that empowers this level of activism is collectivity, unity, all of us doing it together. Often when you get isolated, it does drive a lot of fear in an individual to kind of temper their voice. When you talk to some of the younger players, particularly, you know, you have on here Dwayne Wade, Russell Westbrook, Michael Bennett, Carmelo Anthony, Swin Cash. I'm also curious about their coaches, right? So, you know, I'm from the Bay, and, you know, I'm not just putting a shameless plug in for them Dubs, you know what I'm saying, them Golden State Warriors. but the coach, Steve Kerr,
yes,
also is in this book, and I'm interested to hear how did that help some of the athletes be able to feel more comfortable? Did that factor in at all, you feel? Or?
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do, especially with the NBA, you know, I wanted to interview a lot of the NBA CEOs. I don't call them owners, but CEOs. So I interviewed Mark Cuban, interviewed Ted Leonsis, and I asked them point blank, you know, if an athlete chooses to speak out on a topic, even one that you disagree with, would he be punished? And they all said, well, no, we appreciate the level of activism and the history, and they talked about Bill Russell and Kareem, and they all said the same thing. And then I interviewed Commissioner Adam Silver and kind of asked him the same thing. And he also echoed the sentiments of the others, just that you know, but the NBA is different. You know what I mean? I wanted to interview Roger Goodell, but he didn't return my call.
He didn't bite on that.
No, he didn't. But I wanted to. I wanted to interview him. I want to interview Dan Snyder and, you know what I mean, Jerry Jones, because I know the culture is different. So when NFL players take a stand, they're really taking a different level of a risk because the entire culture is different.
Right.
Now in the NBA, you have a different culture. You have coaches like Popovich and Steve Kerr, you know what I mean, and Stan Van Gundy, and I was able to interview them, and it's just a whole different culture, so you don't have to be afraid. Now, it wasn't always like that in the NBA. So I also interviewed Craig Hodges, you know what I mean, and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Now, that was under a different administration. That was under David Stern, not Adam Silver. And now, you know, things are changing in the NBA, and the NFL is taking a little bit more time for it to change. But what I love seeing is I love seeing the high school level players, you know what I mean, high school athletes taking a knee. And one of the things I was able to do was I interviewed some of the family members of the victims of police brutality to ask them, you know, how they felt when they saw different athletes taking a stand for them. So Trayvon Martin's brother and Eric Garner's daughter, Emerald. And, you know, one of the things that Trayvon Martin's brother, Javaris, said to me that really caught me off guard was he said, you know, when Trayvon Martin was first killed, the family was trying to get somebody locally to cover the story, and nobody would cover it.
Wow.
He said that what they told him was that, you know, this isn't newsworthy. This is just another young black man being killed.
Wow.
He said people don't realize, but it was a long time before it began national exposure. He's like, but then Dwayne Wade talked about it, and LeBron James talked about it, and you had Kevin Durant talking about it, and they all posed in the hoodies, and everybody was like, when I say everybody, I'm talking about mainstream America, was like, well, what is this that has Dwayne Wade and LeBron James all riled up? And then they started paying attention to it. But he said if it weren't for athletes, nobody would know my brother's name.
Wow.
And that just hit me hard because, number one, I'm interviewing him and I didn't expect him to say all of that. And then it just kind of reinforces the importance of having athletes use their voices and encouraging them to continue, because it's a big platform.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a blessing. Look, LeBron James has as many Twitter followers as 45.
Wow.
You know, so when he says something, people hear it.
People hear it.
Right. So that's why we have to keep encouraging them to use their voice.
Last thing, what would you say to many of us? How many of y'all sports fans? You watch sports, right? What would you say to consumers, many of us who actually support these sports teams? How could they support athletes and or make the environment easier for these influencers to use their platforms in ways where it does not kind of blow back on them? Appreciating that there's always some risk, but I do think the power is always with the people. Would you just say a few words to folks in the legacy of Dr. King and many of these others athletes that come before? What would you say to folks?
Well, one of the things is always to remember that whenever you do speak on something, you're going to be criticized. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to tell someone to shut up and dribble or shut up and play when they agree with them. It's when you disagree with them, they say, oh no, you should stay in your lane. You should stick to what you do. And, you know, one of the things that Kareem said in the book was, his advice to athletes was, be educated on the subject and speak with clarity and speak confidently and don't back down. Because the same thing he was told to shut up and play back in the 60s. You know what I mean? This shut up and dribble thing is not anything new. So the thing is that, yes, you want people to have support. And now with Twitter and social media, athletes are able to feel the support a little bit differently. You know, because when you hear athletes talk about in the past, they were kind of out there on an island by themselves and they didn't really feel the support. But I think that one of the things that especially good for the community to do is, you know, and inviting athletes to come to programs and for them to join forces with you. And this is something that I always say, don't be afraid to do that. You know what I mean? You have
that partnership.
Definitely, partnership is so important. Yeah. I mean, because, you know, they have the platform and they have these thoughts and they have the ear of so many and the voice of the media is listening to them, just waiting for them to say something. And, you know, sometimes you definitely need guidance. You definitely need preparation and things of that nature, and you work together. I mean, I would tell organizations not to run away from embracing an athlete who is speaking out and you see that you have some commonality.
Etan Thomas, everybody. Let's appreciate him for coming by and helping share this stage. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it.